Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So a few weeks ago now, I showed you this, the incredible Phaseomatic Deluxe from Effectrode, which is a completely tube-driven phaser pedal, and there is so much functionality in this deceivingly simple looking box, you would not believe it. So even in that full 30-minute walkthrough of the feature set of this pedal, I barely began to scratch the surface of what it's really capable of. So you can have 2-stage phasing, 4-stage phasing, 2 LFOs running independently of each other, scattered waveforms, different levels of feedback. There is so much packed into this box. Now, in that video, I said that I was going to make a part 2, which was comparing the Phaseomatic to a selection of classic vintage phasers. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. So I have 5 vintage phasers laid out here. Firstly, I have probably the holy grail, a 1974 Budbox MXR Phase 90. So this is the legend. This is the Eddie Van Halen phaser, the David Gilmour phaser, and this is the first edition of the circuit, which is said to be the one you want. The second pedal I have from 1977 is the Phase 90's little brother, the MXR Phase 45, which is a 2-stage phaser. This is a slightly later one, so it has the block logo, but in terms of circuit, it didn't change from 74 to 77 in the way that the Phase 90 did. So this is exactly the same circuit as a script logo 74 Phase 45. The third pedal is from 1975, which is the MXR Phase 100, which I believe is a 10-stage phaser. You have 6 stages that kind of modulate and 2 that are fixed for some sort of guttural filtered sound. So you can choose different levels of feedback, you can choose different widths. This is the Keith Richards phaser, he really likes this. Then from 1977, I have a V1 Electro-Harmonix Small Stone. So a much more simple feature set, you just have a knob for the rate and a feedback switch, but it's a real classic as well. And finally, from roughly 1975, we have the Musitronics Mu-Tron Phasor II. So again, this is kind of the holy grail phaser along with the Phase 90. I think it's arguably not as well known as a Phase 90, but it's right up there too. So this is a real classic, especially amongst funk players. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dial in just one of my favourite sounds in each of those vintage phasers. I can't go through all the sounds they can do because we'll be here till next week. So I'm going to dial in my favourite sound in each of those pedals and then see how close I can get the Phaseomatic sounding to each of those phasers. So this isn't designed to emulate vintage phasers at all, but it really impressed me and I wanted to see with all its features how close I can get it sounding to those classics and what differences and or similarities there are between each of them. So without further ado guys, let's get going. So there we are, folks. Now, please do comment underneath, let me know which of those phaser sounds were your favourite and why. I love chatting nerd guitar stuff with you guys in the comment sections. But there were some pretty substantial differences, weren't there? Now, there were a few things that made putting that video together a little bit tricky. Firstly, the Phaseomatic Deluxe has a lot of different waveforms for the LFO and a lot of different patterns. So for the whole video, I was running it in normal mode, which is, as it would suggest, the most normal out of all of them. But the shape knob has 16 different waveforms in it. So I was moving that around, but I couldn't get it to do a kind of classic symmetrical phasing. So in the way that the classic phaser would all go up and down and up and down, this would kind of go up and down and up and up and down and up. So it was a bit more kind of glitchy, and I just could not get it, regardless of where I put that shape knob, to do just a normal symmetrical sine wave pattern. So that made it a little bit tricky to dialing it in. But when it comes to the sort of overall differences between the classics and the Phaseomatic Deluxe, I think the tone was a really important one. The Phaseomatic was a much more warm sounding phaser, as you would expect, being packed full of 3 vacuum tubes. So it had a more sort of thick, harmonically rich low end, and it was a little bit darker up top. I mean, when you added the feedback in, it got a bit more watery, but in its stock form, it was a little bit kind of warmer overall. I know that's a buzzword from the gear page for anything with a tube in it, but that's what I was hearing. Secondly, headroom. Something like the Phase 90, when I was digging in, even on a fairly low powered Strat, it was crunching up the circuit in a way that it wasn't doing with the Phaseomatic Deluxe. There were a few volume differences as well. Now, the biggest one was obviously the Small Stone. I'm not convinced this doesn't have a slight problem, so it might need a brief holiday to go and see Nick Williams to see if he can bring some of that level back. But vintage modulation pedals are known for dropping level. Like the Electric Mistress is a big one as well, in the way that the Phaseomatic doesn't. Now, I think on the circuit board of the Phaseomatic, you can adjust the volume, the output level. So at the moment it's set to Unity, as Phil sets it factory standard, but you can adjust that if you want to. Most vintage modulation pedals don't have any sort of level control, so if it drops the level, you're stuck with it. The Phaseomatic doesn't drop the level, but you know, you can adjust it if you need to. But with the MXR phasers especially, the kind of upper mid-range EQ was very, very different. So I said that the Phaseomatic kind of rolls a little bit high end off, it's quite warm in the top end. The phasers, the MXRs, they have a real kind of bite in the upper mids, the Phase 90 especially. Now, I have a theory as to why this is, so bear with me on this. This pedal is a modern designed phaser. This is from 2020. Whereas if you compare it to something like the Phase 90 from 1974, back then, pedals didn't really exist. It was the very early days of them. You had some fuzzers and kind of level boosts, but that was about it. It was long before overdrive pedals came on the market. So people using a Phase 90, let's take Eddie Van Halen as an example, was putting the Phase 90 into a cranked amp more often than not. Whereas nowadays, we all have these big pedal boards, and it's more common to run modulations after overdrive pedals and have the amp set cleaner. So if you've ever tried to boost a cooking amp, you'll know that you generally need to kind of boost the sort of loudness frequencies, that upper mid-range, and also shelve off some low end, because if you try and boost into an amp with a lot of low end in it, especially if you take Eddie with his Marshalls cranked up and also starved of voltage to make it gain up and sag even more for the brand sound, you need to tighten that low end up. And that's why I suspect this is much more pronounced in the upper mid-range and shelves off a lot more lows than something like this, because it's designed to go pre-gain rather than post-gain. So I'm going to do a quick experiment with that now. I'm going to put both of these phasers both into a gain pedal and after a gain pedal to see what differences we can hear. So let's have a look. So there we are then, running both these phasers into the Kingsley page there, which was deliberately set up quite thick. This tightens the low end and focuses the mid-range, whereas this sounded a little bit more kind of undefined in comparison. But putting both of them after a Mark I tone bender, which was deliberately chosen as being quite an aggressive sounding fuzz in the mid-range, this was definitely phasing the sound, but it had low end in it. It was more balanced over the full frequency range, whereas this, with that mid-range focus after a Mark I tone bender, was so gnarly in that mid-range. I mean, it would get you heard in a mix, but it was not pleasant to listen to. So I think this works much better post-gain, and this works a little bit better pre-gain. So of course you can put either in either position, but I think that's probably a design consideration we're hearing as a difference between the classic phasers and the Phaseomatic. This is probably designed to have overdrive pedals run into it, whereas this is designed to go into a gain stage of a cooking amp. So that's just my theory, but please do comment underneath, folks. Let me know what you thought of all of that. What were you hearing? Which was your favourite? Do you agree with my theory on design specifications? I would love to have a chat with you folks in the comments. But overall, those are 6 incredible sounding phasers, aren't they? You would not be upset to have any of those in your collection. They are all absolutely magic in their own way. But of course, if you're going for pure functionality and absolute just out there wacky sounds, this is where it's at. There is so much in this box. The classic phasers have like a few sounds in them. You know, you can adjust the speed and the width maybe, but that's about it. This, you can adjust absolutely everything. So it's definitely a more modern design than the classics, but you would not be disappointed with any of them. So thank you for watching, folks. I hope this video was interesting and useful for you. Please do comment underneath, let me know all your thoughts, and please do carry on subscribing. I know I always say it, but it does make a big difference when you do that. So thanks, folks, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.